Welcome to Caching Waves. This is an Elliott Wave update for Render. Now, this is going off last video. I just wanted to show you what we were potentially expecting as we are in the B zone or X zone of this move to the downside. These things at the same time too is we only have 3 waves up, and that can also be an ABC or a WXY until it confirms the pattern to us, right? So those of you that have bought up into these assuming those 5 waves, and then what happens, the market just draws down on you, right? It can be pretty frustrating. You can feel like it's just meant to go against you. That's where people are like, it's rigged, all this and that. But if you're aware of these things, this could just get dragged out in time, and we just drag sideways for a while. It becomes much easier to decide where your entries are. All right, so that was the last video. And here we are. We drag down just as the alternative I had there. So as of now, very complex structure. Very difficult to know what's happening here, but I'm going to explain to you what I do in these situations. I suggest not trading in B zones, which is currently where we're at, until a structure is complete. That's where we get the most edge. But the good thing about this, I do think the next move is likely to the upside. Reason being was that 3-wave move above the previous high. If I go to the 4-hour, you know we have a series of potential nested 1-2s gearing up and looking for very high upside. Very, very high if these are actually labeled correct. I believe it was 4 or 5 1-2s, 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2, 4 of them. So we're going to be tracking this one pretty closely, because once that entry does happen, I want to be quite involved in it. So the trouble with this one is all the overlap. It's very, very, very difficult. So when this happens is I focus on shape, potential pivot points, potential corrections in play. But the way I have this labeled right now is an A, B, C as our first correction. B waves are very tough. It's just the closest I could get to this being its own move. As you can see, before I had it as a WXY down to this level, but that's too quick to be part of this move. So I relabeled it where this is a running flat, A, B, or WXY, and then our C wave, A, B, C. It was pretty much the 1-to-1, so it made the most sense. But you can see it gets very difficult because one thing can lead to another, especially when you got flats, but that's the closest one with a 1-to-1. And then if this is our WXY with a expanded flat in between as our X wave, I think it's around the 1.618. It's even past that. They can get pretty extended up to the 2.618. I don't like to push it too far, but it does look the best in this situation. You got a expanded flat right here, but you can see it's very ugly. And this move, the best I can see it as is we have 3 there, and then 5 and 5 is it would have to be a double zigzag, right? Because of the size of this correction next to it. So you can see we have a lot of difficulty in this current correction. So what I would like to see though is in time it take about the same amount of time as the first wave, which would be a large WXY. So if we just drag down here, we'd want it to come down around the 1-to-1 in time. That's where we have a 3-wave with a connector. That's what we're looking for. Right to around 917. And then we have a potential expanded flat. We come down to about the 382 and the 50, and then we can finally reverse to the upside. I know it's frustrating because all this overlap, it's very difficult to trade. That's why I suggest staying out of it, because they can morph so quickly. As you remember, we're expecting this, right? If we don't make another wave up, We were expecting this. So that's why I suggested waiting. And the tell on that was right when we dropped here, because we were no longer making that diagonal shape. We were expecting a diagonal there if you're watching on the lower time frames. But even this can morph, just to be clear. And I'm going to show you the way that can morph as well. But right now we want to see a 1-to-1. That's off this pivot here. Our W wave for an X off our Y. That would be ideal, but our move off the top would most likely be like a 1.618. As you can see, those line up at 917. The 1-to-1 of this W wave off the X, if that's labeled correctly for our Y, is at 917, and the 1.618 of our first 3-wave move off our B or X wave is at about the same price. So you can see we got that confluence there. So I'll mark that off as an area of interest if we do just come down. Right there is pretty much our ideal spot. We've got the 1-to-1 of the WXY and the 1.618. So I'm going to mark that off just so I'm aware of those zones. Now that's if we come straight down from here. That would also be the 1-to-1 in time. So you'd be looking at Friday, March 22nd. Pretty much ideal, or Saturday the 23rd. If we follow this path to the downside. Now I see 5 waves down here. So we'd want to see this turn into a 5-wave move. And in which that case, if this is a double zigzag, that can be an A wave, and we get 5 wave down for an ABC as a flat. Now alternatively, this is where it can get confusing, and why I say just wait it out. You're not going to miss anything. Is I see no real possible way this just takes off from here unless it ends up making a diagonal to the upside. And this would be our wave 1. This would be a wave 2. I think very unlikely though. 3, 4, and then we get our 5, right, as a diagonal. We contract up. But if that happens, like, be aware you have so much time to get into that, right? It's not going to get away from you. That's why I'm not concerned when price moves up, when I get a 3-wave pattern, because I know it's very unlikely to actually get away from me. It's just going to grind up slowly. Now, this is where these patterns can get confusing, because there's no time frame on B waves, right? I just use them as guidelines. I want the right looking wave, but it can just drag, and then eventually we get the move. So when you're looking at these, this is why I say look at shape. Is this our A or W? This is a running flat, and this is our connector, right? So are these the matching waves we're connecting currently? If that's the case, we should just come straight down from here, and this correction's complete. But one thing I always try and look at is, does this look equal value? Because this would be a running flat in between connecting these two waves. Ideally, we hit a 1-to-1, but a 618 is our minimum requirement. And we did hit the 618, but we didn't hit the 1-to-1. So when that happens, I just keep that in mind, because what can actually be happening is this is our A. If I put this on, see our B or X zone. You can see we just ticked through the 1.382. So what can actually be happening is that's our first wave up as an A. This is a running flat, and then we get our move up, where these end up being the connectors with a running flat in between. That's when you see price really spike up quickly and everyone FOMOs in. And then as soon as we get that, this is just an A, B, C. As soon as we get that, we just collapse, right? So always keep in mind that corrections can get bigger. And our pivot area would be probably around the 786 if that ends up happening. And then we'd get that 5 waves down and this would become a flat, right? So when you see these three wave patterns, it's best to consider, okay, can there be a running flat in between? Is this the correction complete and we come straight down from here? Or is this an A? This is a very long extended running flat, and then we get our C wave over here, right? So just things to keep in mind. And that's another reason, like this this sideways channel here does not look the greatest, right? I just pulled from our A wave off our B, but you can see we got some like overlap there for the C. And that's another reason I wouldn't be surprised to see this take right off and then reverse after. Because if we pull it, you can see we're respecting our channel a little better. But we would get extended out here a little bit for our C wave. So it's not ideal. We'd be looking for the 1-to-1 or the 1.618, basically almost like a double top somewhere in that zone. So if we don't come down from here, that's what I'm expecting. And you might even say, wait, but we got 5 waves, right? This looks like 5. Yeah, because this is a 3, right? We get a 3 and 5 for a flat, and then we go. So that's why I always ask myself, if you see 5 waves, is it completing a flat or starting a move to the downside? It can be both. It can be starting a move to the downside where we're complete here, or it could be ending a flat and we get one more move, then we come down. But you can see it's pretty difficult. The best thing to do is if you're very active in the market, is play this down on like the 5-minute and pay attention. Because if you break structure, find support at this previous area of resistance, start to drift sideways, that's actually a pretty good trade setup, right? Because your stop can go right at that low. But it's important to watch the patterns as they're happening. Down at like the 3 or 5 minutes, you can actually see that pattern play out. Like I'll go down to the 3-minute here, and it looks like 5 waves almost complete. But if you see, a pretty momentum move here, break previous resistance, and then you're channeling sideways, that's a pretty good setup, right? Just for that last wave to the upside. At least wanting to break this high. You get like a 3-to-1 there. But if this is 5 complete and we're actually moving to the downside, then you'd be looking more of a sideways action, right? You might see a very deep correction, trend sideways. That could be your opportunity to short, right? Same idea. So once you start to watch and understand bottoming patterns and corrective moves, it'll give you much more edge in the market, even just for quick scalps and whatnot. But right now, if this continues to the downside, ideal area for a pivot is at 917. And we'll see if we get that, right? That's that 1.618 extension of this wave off our B or X wave. That's also the 1-to-1 of this WX for our Y. And then looking to move very strong to the upside. Hopefully BTC gets a 5-wave move, so it'll make things much easier. But I hope this was helpful. When you get very difficult patterns, just try and understand how they can happen. And if this does end up being some sort of diagonal to the upside, it's no big deal. It's not going to get away, right? All right, guys, so that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.